Good day, everyone. Welcome to the Oral Communication and Context, Week 3. Our discussion for this week will be all about the communication breakdown. This topic will be exclusively for the grade 11 students coming from the Binyan City Senior High School, San Antonio campus. As you can see here, or as you may observe right now, the camera is at the bottom part of the laptop. That's why I want to apologize to everyone for the view or the angle of my face. So I would like to inform everyone that this is going to be a short topic for this week, and I hope you will be able to understand a lot of information about the communication breakdown. So let's proceed. Of course, last week, if you were able to watch our previous lesson or the previous video about the models of communication, I was able to introduce to you or to all of you the oral communication context teachers coming from the grade 11 level. Okay, so for now, I just wanted to introduce to you once again myself. I am Sir Mavs. I'm currently living in Binyan, Laguna, here in San Antonio. And if you have any questions or if you have any inquiries, please contact me or send me a message through my Facebook account. That will be John Maverick. Or if you have formal transaction with me, you may send me an email either. Okay, so let's proceed. Of course, after you go through this module, you are expected to know the following. So we have four. Let's start with the number one. That is to identify or define the concept of communication breakdown. Number two, identify the different kinds of barriers to effective communication. Number three, explain the causes of communication breakdown. And of course, the number four, that will be use appropriate strategies to avoid communication breakdown and achieve the goals of relationship and community building. So as we go on with this topic, you'll be able to learn the following: to define, to identify, to explain, and to use appropriate strategies to avoid communication breakdown. Okay? So I hope everyone are ready to listen to our discussion for today, and let's continue. Of course, for this week, we're going to talk about the communication breakdown. When you say communication breakdown, it is considered as a concern or is a barrier, or let me say a hindrance to a good communication flow when it comes to a communication situation. So next. Before we go on, I want you to read the activity from the What's In, page 28 to 29. So I just wanted you to review the following because this is going to be a recap of our previous lesson about the models of communication. So if you think that letter A, letter B, letter C, letter D falls under the three um, models of communication, just write the letter of the correct answer per column. Okay? Okay. So I want you to answer this one. The diagrams you can see on the left part of the screen. Of course, the directions is identify the reason for the communication breakdown in each picture. Write your answer in separate sheets of paper similar to the box below. So as you can see, there are three images or three pictures that represents communication breakdown. So based on the pictures, what do you think is current situation or this current happenings on the picture? Let me say the current situation of the participants. What is their concern or what is their issue? What causes disturbance in their conversation? So write your answer on the given or provided box at the right side of the photos. Okay, so what's new? Of course, communication is a process of exchanging thoughts, ideas, and opinions in order to connect with other people. So, just like what I've said earlier, based on the definition given by um, Martinez the First, communication is an exchange of feelings, thoughts, emotion, and ideas through a common system of symbols, signs, and behavior. So it is more of a conversation. It is more of a talking process or speaking process. It's sort of um, interaction between participants or the speakers, or let me say the interlocutors. Okay, so its goal is to achieve a clear and effective understanding resulting to good relationships in the community. So however, there are times when this goal is not reached due to certain factors. So when this happens, there is communication breakdown. So these are disturbances that causes the conversation or communication process a let me say communication process a failure. Okay. Next, what is it? So the elements involved in communication are important in the success or failure of this process. So these very same elements, like the sender, like I said earlier before, the sender, the message, the receiver, the feedback, let me say the channel, and etc., can pose a threat to the efficiency or effectiveness of the process. So, meaning to say, these elements may cause barriers or may be considered as barriers once they have been effective depending on the communication situation. So they become barriers to communication. So simply put, the communication breakdown results when the intended message of the sender is not understood exactly by the receiver. Barriers to communication are present. So meaning to say, for example, I am talking to my friend and we are in the middle of the street, and while we are having a conversation there are a lot of vehicles passing by, and these vehicles keeps on beeping their horns. So while we are talking or having conversation, meaning to say we are being interrupted because of the sounds or the noise. That is a physical noise. We hear a lot of noises um, which causes the communication process be disturbed. Did you get it? So for example, another example, if I am talking to my friend and I'm currently thinking of how I'm going to pay my debt to my other friend while talking to my friend in front of me, it causes me psychological noise, or it causes me psychological disturbance because while I'm talking to my friend, I cannot talk to him or her properly because of what I'm currently thinking. That is an example of barrier or barriers. Next, we will proceed now in the topic about barriers in communication because we're going to parse or enumerate the different barriers in communication. Okay, so and at the same time later on we're going to discuss also the noises or types of noises in the communication situation or process. Okay, so let's start with the number one. Of course, the physical barriers. These barriers are the natural environmental conditions that act as a barrier in communication in sending the message from sender to receiver. Just like what I've said earlier, the beeping of the horns coming from the vehicles passing by in the streets while we are having a conversation with my friend. So here are some of the examples available. So number one, people talking too loud. Yes, while we are talking with our friend, let's say there are people that surrounds us, and then there are a lot of people talking too. Just put in an example in a classroom. So while you are having a conversation with your classmate, and your other classmates are very noisy and they are talking too loud, you'll not be able to understand each other well because you're being disturbed, not only in your mind but also because of the noise that you are hearing coming from your surrounding. Number two, noise from a construction site. Do you know what is a construction site? For example, those trucks on a certain area or location where for example, they're currently building a skyscraper. So there are a lot of, sounds coming from the hammers, coming from the trucks, and etc. Number three, loud sound of karaoke. So when we say loud sound of karaoke, they are singing. For example, your neighbor are having a birthday party and they're, using a karaoke. So if your house is just beside the house of your friend who is having his or her birthday, I mean to say you will be disturbed. You will be disturbed. For example, you're talking to your family where you are eating and then they're having a karaoke, then it's gonna be it's gonna be a hindrance, or it's gonna be a barrier to the conversation or the communication process. Number four, blaring of jeepney horns. Just like what I've said earlier, the sound of the jeepney horns or the vehicles passing by the streets. That is an example of physical barriers. Those barriers that you can see around you, or those barriers that you can hear around you. Okay? So next, the next barrier is the psychological barriers. This barrier is called as mental barriers because it focuses on the mind of the person. This refers to social and rather personal issues of a speaker towards communicating with others. So, for example, trauma. Have you encountered someone who's having a trauma, and then you are talking to him or her, and then he or she cannot utter words properly? Why? Because it affects, or trauma affects, the mind of its victim. Meaning to say, if you're having a trauma, you cannot speak properly. You cannot understand what you are saying, what you are listening to, because you're having a trauma. That is a bad experience. Number two, shyness, lack of confidence. When you say shyness in Filipino, that is mahiyain or hiya. So in lack of confidence, you're having a lack of confidence. You cannot show to others what you can do or literally do because of lack of confidence. Maybe you're ashamed, or maybe you're shy because of your physical appearance, or maybe you are shy because you're not fond of facing people or crowd. So that is an example of barriers to good communication. So, for example, you're having a conversation with your friend around numerous people, then sometimes these people will be able to, or would prefer to go somewhere else, just the two of you having a conversation about something. So number three, depression still on the mind. It affects the mind of the person because you are depressed, you cannot talk properly, you cannot, it's just the same with trauma actually. The effects of having a trauma and depression is almost the same. So meaning to say, you cannot utter words properly, you cannot let's say um, express freely your thoughts because of your suppression. Number four, fear, stage fright. So, for example, in my case before, when I was a student, it I cannot literally give or express the information that I have in mind because the fear or being frightened in standing in a stage gives me more of a bad experience. It gives me lack of information. It blanks my mind, and at the same time, I get so nervous. So because of that, you cannot properly perform in front of your listeners or your audience. And that is something that can be considered as psychological barrier, right? So if you're ashamed, you're having depression, you have trauma, you have fear or stage fright, and at the same time, you have something in mind that you don't want it to tell people, you're keeping lies. That is an example. Those are the example rather of psychological barriers. So let's proceed. So for the cultural barriers, um, it pertains to communication problems encountered by people regarding their intrinsic values, beliefs, and traditions in conflict with others. So people's culture affects the way they communicate and relate to others. So for example, cultural belief is a hindrance or let's say a barrier to good communication process because number one, different beliefs. For example, I've told my friend that um, wearing a red T-shirt in a burial is prohibited because of our beliefs. That's what I believe in my own culture. So in Filipino, hindi ako nagsusuot ng pula dahil bawal siya sa pag may patay. So for others, when you are talking to someone whose perception or belief varies from you, meaning to say they will disagree. So from there, from the disagreement, meaning to say you will not be able to understand each other's side because you will just share what you really believe in. So that is an example of cultural barriers. Ay hindi yan pwede. So I don't believe on that because that's not what I know about blah blah blah. So people varies when it comes to beliefs. Number two, traditions and customs, our way of life. So number three, the manners of dressing. For example, if the girls are wearing shorts, for others that's gonna be something seductive, right? So seductive. So before you go on with your conversation, you will just notice the way of dressing of the person, and then you will, before you start the topic, you will just inform him or her about his or her way of dressing. So common situation for Filipinos. Number four, the way we speak. So if we are having a, stuttering when we are using the English language and we are having conversation with someone, they usually, criticize the way you speak, and that's the reason why they are not longer interested talking to you. So it sometimes depends on the way you speak. So that is really a cultural barrier. Number four, the linguistic barrier. So pertain conflicts with regards to language and word meanings. Because words carry denotative and connotative meanings, they can sometimes cause confusion and misunderstanding. Meaning of words and symbols also vary depending on culture. So just like here in the Philippines, we are having different languages and sometimes we do have the same word but different in meaning. So sometimes we misinterpret those words, and then we're having different meaning out of the given statement coming from uh, our friend or someone we are talking to. So number one example is the difference in language. Just like what I said earlier, since in the Philippines we're having different languages, meaning to say we frequently differs in comprehension of a certain word. For example, in Bisaya, when we say ambo, that is a rat. And for some, ambo is having a different meaning. So meaning to say it varies over time. Number two, the accent in the dialect. When we are talking, we can easily identify the accent and the dialect of the person. Meaning to say, if he is having an accent from the Visayan areas, you'll easily identify that. For example, hindi naman ako kakain dyan. So for that, the accent is different. That is not a proper Filipino or Tagalog um, accent, and at the same time, the dialect. When we say dialect, this is the minor, or when we say dialect, it is the smallest unit of a language coming from a tribe or a small group of people. So number three, use of jargon and slang. So when we say jargon and slang, we have different terminologies used by speakers. Each speakers or each interlocutor possesses different jargon and slang, or when we say jargon or slang, meaning to say um, terminologies that only the certain area can only understand that. Okay, number four, speech defects or language impairments. So speech defects or language impairments, we are not using the language properly. We're having difficulty in using the language properly. So that's speech defects or language impairments. At the same time, the way we speak is another point of point to be considered as a linguistic barrier. Next. So Werder Ver of 1991 gives a similar idea of barrier when he classifies the what you call this classifies different kinds of barriers. So let's say number one, the external, internal, and semantic noise. These are the noises that we're going to talk about, which are considered as barriers also. So we will continue with this. So these are the types of noise. Okay, number one is the external noise. What are external noises? This is the sight, sound, external stimuli, that draw people's attention away from intended meaning. For example, number one, just like what I've said earlier, number one, noise from vehicles. So the horns on the streets. Number two, singing at the neighborhood, just like the sound of the karaoke. External noise, noises that can be found in your environment. So number three, visual aids in front of the classroom. Instead of listening to the one who is speaking in front of the class, you are just focusing on the visuals because that is what your eyes can see. It attracts your interest. Number four, the dog barking. So for example, you're having a vlog, you're discussing you are discussing a lesson and then the dog keeps on barking, then that means um, it gives us interruption because we keep on hearing those barks coming from the dog and disturbs our focus while we are delivering our message to our receiver. Number five, the sound of airplane. So as we all know, the sound of the airplane is really that loud and strong. So if an airplane passes by our community or our area, then we need to stop our um, we need to stop the conversation or the communication process because it will surely or currently disturb the process. So that is external noise. Noises that can be found in our environment. Okay. So next is internal noise. When we say internal noise, it is somehow the same with psychological noise. It is a noise coming from ourselves. So it comes from within our body. So while we are having a conversation with our friends, and then we are currently feeling pain in our back and our or any parts of our body, for example, it gives us uncomfortable feeling, which affects the conversation or the communication process. So just like number one, confrontation with a friend. Since we're having confrontation with a friend, it hurts our feelings, and when our feelings has been hurt, meaning to say we will not be able to express freely our idea or information that we wanted to give to or what that we wanted to tell our friend. So it affects our overall feeling within our body. Number two, fear of speaking in front of the class. Just like what I've said earlier, you're having difficulty speaking in front of your classmates because you are ashamed, you're afraid, and at the same time, you are um, not confident on your performance on or yourself in presenting yourself with your classmates. Number three, racial prejudice. When we say racial prejudice, for example, if you are a white coming from the Western countries and then you're talking to a black, then sometimes we are not being entertained by whites because we are blacks, for example. Because based on our race, they hate blacks. That's why they are not comfortable and or they are not interested talking to blacks. That is an example of racial prejudice. Meaning to say, um, barrier between races coming for example Western and Asian, Western and Africans, just like that. So that is an example of internal noise. So semantic noise. The semantic noise are the alternate meanings aroused by a speaker's symbols. So this idea means that a word may have another meaning in the minds of the students. This is affected by the language uh, in which they grew and the culture in which they are exposed. So when we say semantic noise, we are having difficulty or let me say it's too hard for us speakers or participants to understand what the other person is telling us because of the way they use the language, meaning to say it depends on the culture that the person we're talking to was exposed or raised. For example, if we are Filipinos, yeah, we are Filipinos actually. So we are Filipinos, and then we are not native speakers of language, and because of that, um, we are not native speakers of English language. That's why we find it hard to speak in English properly. So, since we are trying to speak in English that well, sometimes we are having number one, incorrect grammar. Okay, incorrect grammar. And because of that, it varies the meaning that you really wanted to tell your friend or the one you're talking to. For example, if I will speak the language, then it is in grammatically incorrect, then she or he will not be able to understand me properly. So, meaning to say, there will be a misunderstanding because the other person cannot understand what you're saying. So, simple as that. Number two, using excessive technical words, let's say. It's because I cannot see actually the number two, using excessive technical words, okay, technicalities. So if using bombastic words, meaning to say we are not all familiar with all the words that is in the dictionary. So if you will use bombastic words or words that is unfamiliar, then we cannot easily understand the meaning of the message sent by the one we're talking to. So we just need to use simple words so we'll be able to understand it well. Number three, idiomatic expression. When we use idiomatic expression, it is very poetic. For me, it's very poetic. And not all of us are are able to understand poetic lines or expression that has deeper meaning than the usual meaning. So, for example, if I will say burn a hole in one's pocket, so literally saying, if we're going to focus on the word itself, burn a hole in one's pocket, you will simply burn or you will create a hole in someone's pocket. So for us, that is the literal meaning. But on the other hand, it is different. It has deeper meaning that no one can easily identify or define. So we need to avoid using idiomatic expressions if we are just having a casual conversation with someone else. Okay? So external noise, internal noise, and semantic noise. External noises that is coming from the environment. Internal noise, again, noises coming from the noises coming from within ourselves. Number three, semantic noise, meaning to say the way we use the language or efficiency in using words and sentences. Okay, let us proceed. Okay, so since we are done with our topic because it is just short and self-explanatory actually, so I want you to look for the following activities here on our screen. So what you're going to do is to answer what's more on page 31 to 32, both activity 1 and 2. But you will just answer that and it is no longer needed to be submitted to your advisors. Okay, just focus on your weekly home learning plan and answer those activities which are indicated on the WHLP or weekly home learning plan. So the purpose of this activity only on my screen is for you to review what you have learned based on our topic for this week. Okay, so what you need to answer and submit to us or to your advisor or to your teacher for oral communication is the what's new part and at the same time the additional activities. Okay, so please refer to your weekly home learning plan for oral communication and follow all the activities that you need to answer. Okay, so for here, answer what's more on page 32. This is just sort of review and what I can do on page 33 and answer additional activities on page 34. Ah, it's 36 rather. So answer after you do that, answer the following activities and then proceed to the assessment on pages 33 to 35. So that is going to be equivalent to 15 points. So this is just again sort of review for everyone if you were able to understand our lesson this week and then focus on your weekly home learning plan so you will be able to know what are the activities that you need to answer for this week, okay, the week 3. Okay, so I hope you understand our discussion for this week. It's just about the barriers to communication, the different types of noises, at the same time the communication breakdown. So before I end this topic, I want to give you some sort of motivation here on our screen. So please read it aloud. Never doubt what you can do because you can do anything you set your mind to. What do you mean by that? You can do everything as long as you will think that you can do it. So as long as you are thinking that you can do everything, then physically you'll be able to do that in the real time. Okay, so do not, let me say, do not give up. Learn to be strong, and then we will be able to move forward despite of our current situation right now during this pandemic in the new normal. So I hope everyone were able to gather information regarding this topic, and I want to say thank you everyone for attending our meeting this week. So for any questions or concerns, please ask politely your teacher and greet him or her well. So for example, Good morning, ma'am. Good morning, sir. I just wanted to ask a question regarding blah, blah, blah. And then do not forget to say thank you in the end. Okay? So another reminder is to stay tuned for the next video lesson for week 4. That's going to be next week. So this is going to be the week 3 and next week will be the week 4. So I'm hoping that everyone will be able to watch that also, and goodbye everyone. Thank you once again and God bless you more. Stay safe and goodbye.